back your homes or restore your dead to life.
But perhaps I can give you justice in the name of our king.
Hey everyone, one of the biggest questions involving Game of Thrones is who is the prince that was promised? If that doesn't ring a bell, then ask yourself, who is Azor Ahai Reborn? Because they're basically the same question. According to legend, the Long Night ended because a mythical figure known as Azor Ahai wielded a flaming sword called Lightbringer. It was said that he drove the others, or the White Walkers, far into the north, separating the ranks of men from the ranks of the dead. Thousands of years later, there are people who believe the reincarnation of this legendary figure will rise up to end the winter that is now upon Westeros. Throughout the television series, we see the Red Woman Melisandre telling Stannis Baratheon that she believes him to be Azor Ahai Reborn. And then after his defeat at Winterfell, she starts to believe Jon Snow may be the prophesized hero. And then over in Essos, High Priestess Kinvara sends out her best preachers to speak about Daenerys, the one she believes is the fabled hero. Then there are fan theories claiming the prince that was promised could be Jorah Mormont, Drogon, Sir Pounce, and even the Night King. I want to discuss the prophecy and who may be the most plausible reincarnation of Azor Ahai. First thing you need to know, Azor Ahai was a hero from thousands of years ago. While some fans insist the prince that was promised is a different person than Azor Ahai, it's actually accepted that Azor Ahai Reborn and the prince are the same person. The prince that was promised is simply just the reincarnation of Azor Ahai. Anyway, the prophecy tells that the hero will be born amidst salt and smoke. In addition to that, a bleeding star is supposed to herald the coming of the prince, and his song is supposedly the Song of Ice and Fire. With that being said, we know the title of the book series, A Song of Ice and Fire, directly correlates with the prophecy. If we take the three main requirements from the legend and try to connect them to the different candidates speculated to be Azor Ahai Reborn, we can begin to narrow down the truth. Let's start with being born amidst salt and smoke. Jon Snow was born at the Tower of Joy, where his mother Lyanna died shortly after giving birth. Ned Stark and Howland Reed had just killed Sir Arthur Dayne, who was guarding the tower. Ned was carrying Arthur Dayne's sword Dawn at the time when he found his sister. In the show, you can see Ned set the blade down at the foot of the bed. The sword was sitting next to a couple bloody rags lying on the bed, and on the pommel of the sword, you can see a star, representing the falling star that makes up House Dayne's sigil. The sword itself was forged from the rock that fell to the ground, marking the place where the Dornish house would build their castle Starfall. We know that a bleeding star is another way of describing a comet. In fact, in both the books and the show, there are observations of exactly this with a red comet in the sky. Now back to the sword. Combined with the bloody rags as well as the blood on the blade, there is a good argument for Jon being born amidst salt and smoke. Oh, and the salt is commonly interpreted to mean a person's tears. That's why so many different people are suspected to be the prince. The prince that was promised is said to be born from Aerys II and Rhaella's line in the Targaryen family, according to a Woods Witch. So if Jon is the prince, then it would fit perfectly with that requirement as well. Rhaegar Targaryen was Aerys and Rhaella's first child, and he grew up believing that he was the prince that was promised, having been born at Summerhall during a great fire which left the Targaryen summer home in ruin. That fire also killed King Aegon V, along with his son and best friend. Rhaella gave birth during the tragedy, and thus Rhaegar was born amidst salt and smoke. Salt once again being from the tears of people crying over the tragedy. Another candidate born from Aerys and Rhaella's line is Daenerys. She doesn't necessarily fit with the description of a prince that was promised, but maybe more of a princess that was promised. Maester Aemon makes note of the fact that in High Valyrian, the term is gender neutral and can be meant for a female as well. Dany was born from salt and smoke on the island of Dragonstone. The castle there is built up on a volcano which obviously has smoke, and the surrounding water has salt. I think you get the point. You could make an argument for almost anyone based off of that one bit of criteria. So let's move on to the Bleeding Star. A bleeding star is supposed to herald the coming of the prince that was promised, and in the show, we see a red comet in season 2 not too long after Dany's dragons hatch, around the same time the War of the Five Kings really kicks off. One thing to note is in the show, Osha says the red comet only means one thing: dragons. This is exactly what blind old Nan says in the books. Everyone else in the world sees the comet and believes it represents different things. The fact that both the show and the books make mention of the red comet having to do with dragons being born, it seems the true connection could definitely have something to do with it, rather than representing any of those other things that were speculated to represent. And then there's the Song of Ice and Fire. Apparently, it's the song of the prince that was promised. If that's true, then the story as a whole must be surrounding the true reincarnation of Azor Ahai. We could say since Ice and Fire fits with the cross between the Starks and the Targaryens, Jon Snow must be the prince. But then again, in a vision of Dany's while in the House of the Undying, she sees her brother Rhaegar talking about the 3 heads of the dragon. He was saying there must be 3 heads and not one, implying maybe more than one person is needed to fulfill the prophecy. Remember, for the longest time, Rhaegar believed he was the prophesized prince, and then later started to believe his son Aegon was the reincarnated hero. We don't really follow the Aegon plot in the show, but in case you're not familiar with the books, just know that Aegon's character had a much bigger role than what we hear of in the television series. Anyway, if there are 3 characters that are needed to make the prophecy work, or whatever the criteria is, we could say that Dany and Jon are 2 top candidates. Tyrion is often suggested to be the 3rd head of the dragon, but I won't get too deep into all of that right now. For the time being, let's narrow it down to just Dany and Jon. Jon has a dream that he is fighting the dead with a burning red sword in his hand. This is obviously a nod to Lightbringer, and it's one bit of evidence that pushes Jon into the spotlight of the prophecy. Plus, Melisandre always sees things in the fire having to do with Jon. This is mostly why she starts believing Jon is Azor Ahai reborn. At the end of season 6, we find out who Jon's mother really was, adding even more evidence showing his character being involved with the prophecy. If one person is going to become this legendary hero, it could easily be Jon Snow, but Daenerys surprisingly has just as much evidence pointing towards her. She, just like Jon, comes from Aerys and Rhaella's line. She put herself in the funeral pyre with Khal Drogo's body, as well as her petrified dragon eggs and Mirri Maz Duur. The next morning, everything is burned except for Daenerys and her newly hatched dragons. What's really interesting is it's also said that this prophesized hero will wake dragons from stone. Petrified eggs are eggs that have turned to stone, so this adds a lot of support for Dany. Oh, and also in the books, the red comet is seen just before the funeral pyre is lit. So which one is the prince that was promised? Are they both involved as the 3 heads of the dragon vision suggest, or is there one person who fulfills the prophecy? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, have a great day, take care, and I will see you tomorrow.